Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today I've got a double embossing technique for you. I'm using the Stampin' Up! Remarkable You set. It comes in 2 boxes, but I'm just using this one box. And I'm also using this Hero Arts Flourish background stamp. I'm going to be using XL Canson mixed media paper, 98 pound. I just cut these sheets in half and I have a 5x7 one that I can start with. I'm going to put this in my MISTI. You see I've removed my foam sheet because I don't need it because I have a cling stamp that's not clear. I'm going to stamp this in Versamark Black Onyx ink. I'm going to do it twice because my paper is a little bit textured, so I didn't get as good of a coverage as I wanted. So I'm going to do that twice, and then I'll sprinkle it with some clear embossing powder. I always do this instead of using black embossing powder. I just use black ink and clear embossing powder. That way I don't have to worry about any black embossing powder getting where I don't want it. I'm using 2 Zig watercolor pens to color this flower. I've got light carmine and wine red. I'm going to start with the wine red, and I'm just going to put a little bit at the base of each one of these petals. I also showed you my aqua painter. I'm going to be using that in just a second. So I've sped this up a little bit so you could just see me coloring just the very base. I'm not being too particular with it. I'm just getting some color down. Now this is the light carmine, and what I'm going to do with this pen is just kind of blend that wine red out just a little bit so that I don't have any lines between the wine red and the light carmine. So just getting a nice blend, but really keeping that color at the base of the petal. So I don't want to move it up just yet because I do want to leave a little bit of white on each of these petals. So if I get too much color on there, it's going to end up covering the whole petal. Okay, now that I've got my color down, I'm going to use my aqua painter and a tissue, of course. It's really imperative that you have this tissue to wipe off color, because when the water hits these watercolor brushes, the color just goes crazy. It just starts blending like crazy. So you want to really control how much color you're pulling out by constantly wiping your brush off so that it's nice and clean. And every time I go back to the paper, I always start in the white area and I move to the color. So once I hit that color, I know I've got too much color on my brush and I need to remove some of it, and then I can go back in and do a little bit more blending. If you're just starting out or you're just a little unsure about your coloring, I would recommend just blending a little bit on each petal and then going back and doing some more blending once you feel more comfortable. Because these colors will continue blending. You don't have to feel like you need to be in a hurry. So they do blend for quite a bit of time, and you don't have to feel like you have to rush. So I would just kind of do it in layers, do it in stages. But as soon as you feel like your color is getting too far out, then you need to stop and wipe your brush. And also another tip, if you are getting too much color and you want to remove some of it, just add some water and then wipe it with your tissue, and it should remove most of the color, and then you can just start over. As you can see, these colors are really vibrant, and this rose looks really pretty with just 2 colors that I'm using. All right, moving on to the stem, I'm going to use deep green, just another one. I have the 48 count set. I'm just going to draw a little line on the left-hand side of this petal, really not spending too much time. I'll grab my aqua painter and just add a little bit of water, and that'll blend it all the way to the other side. So I did that, just a really quick swipe, not too much. After I was done, I decided to go back in with my darker pink color, the wine red, and just add a little bit of extra color at the base of all the petals just to make them pop a little bit more. So it just adds a little bit more shadow in those dark areas at the center of the flower. All right, I've trimmed my panel down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And because I can't see through this sentiment stamp, I'm going to use my Stamp-O-Jig. So it comes with this plastic sheet and this handle that you use in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm going to stamp it first on this sheet, and then I'll arrange it on my cardstock pretty close to the flower. And then I'll put my handle right back where it was, and then when I stamp it, it'll be exactly in the right position. And I always hold my Stamp-O-Jig in my left hand in place to make sure that I don't need to double stamp, just in case I don't get good coverage. And I had to do that in this case. So then I'm going to cover it with some clear embossing powder just so it doesn't smudge during my next step here. And so here we go with the next step, which is the double embossing, and I'm taking my Flourish background stamp. You can use any background stamp that isn't too heavy, so something a little light. I think swirlies are pretty, maybe dots or something like that. I'm going to ink it up with my Versamark ink, and then I'll lay my panel down on top of it. And I usually grab a piece of scratch paper to put on top just to make sure I get really good coverage. So rub the whole thing, and then when I take it off, I'll just kind of flip it over quickly. And now I'm going to sprinkle some clear embossing powder on this and heat it to set it. And so this will actually come out on my flower as well. And you could leave it white. I think the clear on white is really pretty. I decided to add a little color, so I took some tumbled glass, which is a really light distressing color, and I'm priming my applicator. And this is going to just get my applicator ready with just the right amount of ink, because if you start without priming, you might have too much ink on your applicator, and then you'll end up with those rectangular blocks. So I'm going to really use a very light hand. It's better to start slowly and light than to get too much color down. And that's partially why I use the tumbled glass, because I knew I would get just a tiny little bit of color, and then I can always add more if I want to. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in from all of the edges all the way to the flower, but not all the way to the outline, because I do want to have kind of a white halo around it to make it stand out a little bit more. And once I get my panel covered with the tumbled glass, I'm going to move on to the broken china, which is definitely my favorite blue, and it's a little bit darker than the tumbled glass. And my plan was to just ink up the edges so it would be kind of dark at the edges and then get lighter and lighter until it was white toward the flower. But I ended up moving a little bit further in on the flower just because I really liked having the clear embossing flourishes showing up. And the more ink I put down, the more you could see them. I'm going to be putting this panel on a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I've got about 1/4 of an inch mat all the way around, and I wanted to add a little outline to it. So I'm going to grab my ruler and my Stampin' Up! Black marker, and I'm eyeballing about 1/8 of an inch, which should be about halfway in my mat on all sides, and I'm just going to draw a line and just let the line go all the way from one edge to the other. And now I'm going to put some Scotch foam tape on my watercolor panel. And the nice thing about using this paper, this 98-pound paper, is that it is very thin, but because my card base is thicker than the watercolor panel, when I adhere it, the watercolor panel just sort of conforms to the card base, and so it straightens itself out without warping. Anyway, so that is the card for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.